Today we're going to have two webinars to cater for the different time zones. This is our morning webinar, and then we have one later today. And our lineup today is really impressive. However, before introducing our speakers, I really just wanted to say a few words about why cities are important for biodiversity and vice versa. So many of you may know that urban areas now are home to more than half of the world's population. And the projections are that by 2050, in other words, in not that many years, that percentage will reach 70%. So that is quite a staggering figure. We also know, and the scientists and experts tell us, that urban development is a major driver of biodiversity loss. And a few years ago in Montreal, 2022, the world adopted a new framework, the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, or GBF, which sets targets for 2030 and towards the vision of 2050. Cities are really critical in meeting these targets and contributing to their country's achievements in this regard. And the other important thing is that cities are closest to people in the sense that they are at the level where the citizens work, play, and live. So they're able to really be very responsive to things such as biodiversity loss and urban needs. City leaders, importantly, we're seeing that they are and should go beyond simply just protecting open spaces. And we're looking at a greater emphasis on a more systemic approach to nature-based urban governance. So as I said earlier, I hope we have some finance people here, because increasingly we're seeing that there are huge investment potentials also with nature. More than 60% of GDP globally is dependent to a lesser or greater demand on nature. And of this, the percentage of GDP generated by cities is a very big percentage as well. So the other thing about cities and nature is that we've seen across the years how cities that take leadership and are front runners actually also serve to inspire and mentor other cities in the world. And with these few introductory words, I'm going to hand over to our first speaker this morning, somebody who's come very long in this process of Berlin Urban Nature Pact. It's not something that arose early this year. I'm sure Sandra will tell us a little bit more. But Sandra Naumann is the Chief Biodiversity Office in the city of Berlin. So she's going to talk to us about the pact, why it was created, and what are the ambitions and alignment with the Global Biodiversity Framework. Sandra, over to you.
Thank you very much, Ingrid, for the introduction, and yeah, welcome to all the participants. It's really great to see there are so many people who are interested. So I give you a quick introduction because we have a full program that's packed. So, okay, let's start. What is this Berlin Urban Nature Pact about? If we go to the next slide, Jade. Just a small impression. So why is Berlin the first name here? Because it was initiated by Berlin. But by no means it was only developed by Berlin. There were many cities involved, but as Berlin initiated this in 2022, we put Berlin here in the first one, but it's a pact for cities worldwide. So let's go to the next one. Yeah, I think you already said it, Ingrid. So why do cities can have a big role in protecting biodiversity? So we see already at global, at EU, but also we see at national scale that increasingly climate, but also environmental protection gets less attention and less priority because it's not a lot about security, still economy. But this is the thing where cities have another window of opportunity because we can do our own local action plan. So we of course we do also depend on national legislation, EU legislation, and global legislation, but we have a lot of liberty to create our own strategies. And you see on the right side, just fresh from the press, Berlin published the Berlin Biodiversity Strategy. You see the picture here, and this means we can move on even still, there's like this fatigue at the moment at other scales when it comes to biodiversity. And because it's our duty, right, to make the city a livable and a nice place to live within, because without nature, without biodiversity, there is no place to live really in a city, and especially because of climate change. We can just feel that. So this is why we encourage cities to take bold actions at local level, contributing to the global targets. We have to see, and we can integrate those targets into our planning instruments and development strategies. And actually, we can play a big role when it comes to transformative movement and be pioneers there. So if we go to the next one. So Ingrid already told us the story. So here you see just like how it evolved over the time. It didn't just happen this year. It has a longer track back, as you can see. So it started actually with the fact that the Edinburgh Declaration came out, which also was signed by Berlin. And somebody in our house had the idea, okay, now we did sign the Edinburgh Declaration and later on also the Montreal Pledge, but what to do with it? It's a signature. But where comes the action? And this was the moment where the idea of the Berlin Urban Nature Pact was born. ICLEI was there right from the beginning, supporting us, as well as the National Environmental Ministry and the Federal Agency for Nature Conservation. So there was always a lot of big partners and some cities who were also like big allies in this travel, in this journey. So this is where the track started. And you can't see it in here. But in between, there were many consultation phases with many cities. And the idea really was, okay, let's think how we can put these global targets, especially one from the Montreal Kunming GBF 2030, into local actions. So there was like a 2 years long process also across time zones, because actually I can really say like all the continents, cities from all continents have been involved. And it has been presented then in the end, the final product where we're really proud of with all the cities. By the end of 24, it was launched at the COP. It was finished already before, but you know, it takes time. So the official launch, we have a photo right there, was at the COP in Cali last year. And since then, we started with the acquisition and inviting cities all over the world to join the pact. And we know 2030 is always a nice deadline. So this is the first like milestone we have. But let's be honest, we won't implement all the targets by 2030. So we have to move on. And this is why we do like a short stock taking at 2030. And then we jointly decide how to move on. But we will need definitely more time to stop the decline in biodiversity with all the benefits also for climate adaptation and health. Not by 2030. We need more time for that. Okay, let's move on. Look at it. So this is just the picture you see on the left-hand side. It's our state secretary, well organized, the 8th City Summit. Really nice event. Thanks to Ingrid, Jade, and all the colleagues who made this happen. There were many, many cities. Maybe some of you already also in the room here who did attend the event. Was a packed program, but it was really like a great event. And this is where the pact was launched by Britta Behrendt, and you probably could recognize the person next to her. That's me. So that was a glorious moment. We can move on to the next one, Jade. So yeah, I already told you, 2 years of consultations, more than 90 cities have been involved in municipalities. The idea was in the first step to start with like front runners, pioneers in biodiversity who are eager to do more, but it's not exclusive to those cities to join it. And the ambition was also to do smart targets, which can be measured. We need a measurement, we need monitoring. Otherwise, we will never know if we achieve the targets or not. And as we already have so much things on climate change, like C40, 100 resilient cities, that focus explicitly on climate, which is super and very important. But we need this equivalent also to biodiversity, because if biodiversity is gone, it's gone. It's not coming back. So this is why there's a clear focus on biodiversity. But we also know, I also know, sitting in a municipality, it's difficult. So we really try to fit in a lot of flexibility so that cities can join and become a part of that. Okay, next one. just to give you a glimpse of the cities that have been involved. So there was a good selection made by eThekwini at a time, and there were also many partner cities from Berlin involved. As you know, some were super active, some were maybe a bit less active, but they all did participated over the 2 years. And it was Corona, as you may remember. So, and of course, and the time zones also like to be considered. So it happened, of course, in the virtual room, but long discussions. But also fruitful, that brought us in the end to a very short paper. I think it's only 7 pages long, that includes the targets and the principles. Okay, if we go to the next one. The Berlin Urban Nature Pact. So we always, when I head to Berlin, also like to explain to the colleagues, okay, how does it work? It's not something that is actually really additional. The thing is that makes it special, it really links to local, to national, in our case also to European and international policies. So it's a linking element and already builds already also on existing legislation that you may have in the cities, like strategies, other policies and laws, but it's bringing it together and it's bringing to the global level. So there are a lot of synergies, which we can see in the next slides. This is just the Berlin example. Where you can see all the strategies and the concept I did list here, they have synergy. So they all contribute already to the Berlin Urban Nature Pact in our case. There might be 1 or 2 targets which are not covered, but just to tell you, and this is also what we want to see, we want municipalities to embed the pact in the existing governance framework. And that's possible, so that don't people or like your maybe your colleagues feel it as additional burden, but you really can showcase, hey, see, there's already targets we have and we can build on this, but we can bring it to a global level and really also like show what our city is doing, but not just at the local or national level. We can go beyond with this and also inspire others. Okay, next one. So this is the 7 targets. As you can see, that has been decided by the cities what the target area should be. It's green and blue ecosystems. Of course, education, nature experience is important. Species and habitats is a big important topic. Cohabitation, that's everything where we think about how to build in with gray infrastructure, with buildings. And of course, we should not forget, of course, food and agriculture. A lot of pollinators are populating this and important for food security and soil health, which always, I think, is a little bit forgotten. But we know, I think it's 60% of the biodiversity of the species we have sitting in the soil. And I think that's a tremendous number, so that we also have to consider soil health. And I brought an example from Berlin. If you go to the next one. So there are 28 targets in the pact, but I spoke about flexibility. We realized, oh my God, nobody can accomplish all the 28. Maybe there might be superheroes in the room. I don't know. Berlin can't do it. So we discussed it. Okay, let's be realistic. And let's say at least 15 targets, and at least we ideally one target of each of the 7 target areas. And we can pick targets that has been already achieved. Of course, maybe we look a bit over ambitious, but we are leading in a city. So we said, okay, let's see what we can do. And we reached it to 70 targets in discussion with all the different resources that come into play with city development, agriculture, education. Just give you 3 examples. So one thing I think we can already almost tick the box is education and nature experience. Like you see the photo here, we have beautiful city nature rangers in Berlin, which are doing a fantastic job in our 12 districts. And environment education is really spread all over the cities. So I think we're already pretty good in this, but there's a lot of things where we can do much better. One thing is, of course, finding cohabitation, and that means, well, we have so many birds that die from like bird strike, like flying against glass. It's like it's a horrible number. It's 4 million birds a year in Berlin that just die because they fly against the glass. But of course, we can do much more with animal-aided design and also with green roofs to provide habitats for species. And when it comes to this category species and habitats, that also includes, for example, like increasing our share of protected areas, and also like what we call these other effective area-based conservation measures, so areas that not being protected. And this is the 30% target. That is, of course, like you can also find it in the GBF and in other frameworks. And also, if you go through the list of the targets, you see a lot of similarities because we really tried with the targets to stick to the global frameworks and make really an alignment. Okay, and I'm almost done. Also, my time is running up. Next slide, Jade, please. Yeah, okay, that's it. Thank you. You see all the supporting institutions and partners we have. We are really lucky to have a coordination office for the Berlin Urban Nature Pact run by eClay Europe and eClay South Africa. Jade and Ingrid are here from South Africa and IUCN. And as I mentioned, we're also really grateful for the support from the national level. And yeah, and we really hope that you might be also super inspired and interested to join the pact. We can also share later, we have a short video, which is easily to digest, and you get like a very short imagination what the pact is about. And maybe that's also something to share with your colleagues. If you're interested, please reach out. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sandra, and especially for taking us back a little bit in history. I was there at COP 15, 2022 in Montreal, where it was born, and then also where we gave birth in COP 16 in Cali last year. So, but I think it's also important that you made the point that in Berlin itself, taking the lead and you know, sort of showing commitment, how you work together with all the departments in the municipality to identify those targets. So that I think is a valuable lesson. And with these words, I am now going to hand over to my colleague Jade. She's going to share some information with us. So Jade, over to you.
Thank you, Ingrid. I think from my side, Sandra set the scene perfectly about the Berlin Urban Nature Pact, what it is and how it came about. So I will now speak to you briefly about the principles and the targets and where you can make your commitments to the pact. The Berlin Urban Nature Pact speaks to the following implementation principles, as you can see on the screen: commitment to action and ambition, aligning with policy, governance, and finance, stepwise implementation with smart targets, equal and just co-creation, capacity building and collaboration among cities, and monitoring and reporting progress. These are further divided into the pact targets that Sandra went through, so I won't go into them. So there are 28 targets, and in total, when your city joins the pact, the intent is that your city at least commits to a minimum of 15 out of these 28 targets, and if possible, at least one target from each of these target areas. The Berlin Urban Nature Pact is integrated into the Cities with Nature platform, which is a globally recognized space and enables the cities to collaborate, share knowledge, and report consistently on their biodiversity commitments and progress. Cities with Nature has been acknowledged in the CBD's decision 1512 as the official platform for local governments to report their contributions towards the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. By endorsing the Berlin Urban Nature Pact, your city also commits to joining Cities with Nature. Through this platform, your city can easily access the Berlin Urban Nature Pact framework, explore its targets, and select those most relevant to your local context, aligning with the local actions and global biodiversity commitment goals. Once your city is then ready to report on these principles, Cities with Nature hosts the action platform, where we've taken the global biodiversity framework and broken it down to a local level. So your city can then report on how it's implemented the Berlin Urban Nature Pact and then what that means on a global level. Especially this year, we will also be encouraging cities to report as we head to COP 17, and we will report on implementation. I will paste the link in the chat, but that is short and sweet from me. Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much. So I think, you know, what is important from both Sandra and Jade is the fact that this is an opportunity for cities to show their commitment at the local level and how that aligns to the global targets and goals that are in the GBF. It's an instrument that, as Sandra has explained, was developed. I mean, the idea was, the inspiration came from the city of Berlin, but through that consultative process, it's been, in a sense, almost co-developed by cities from around the world. And I think that's another very important thing, because remember, these global targets are, they're not compulsory for cities, but they're also not specifically focused on city-level interventions and powers and mandates. But what the Berlin Urban Nature Pact has done is to, through this process of co-development, is to come up with a set of smart targets. Sandra explained that we have 28. And given cities also the freedom to, in terms of their own priorities, which are determined also by national priorities, to choose which ones they feel they can commit to, etc. So what we're going to do now, and I know, Sandra, you mentioned that we have a video, but I think before we run the video, and I'm not sure if you've shared that with Jade, let us first go to another city. And I'm really very happy to welcome a fellow South African, Sabelo Nkosi, who is the Senior Manager of Biodiversity Planning at eThekwini Municipality here in South Africa. Because, we've heard from a European city, from Berlin, the creator, the inspirer behind the whole move. But let's see how it lands in a completely different part of the world. And we're almost directly in line, north and south. But very different socio-economic contexts, very different biodiversity contexts. So, Sabelo, over to you. Tell us your story in the Berlin Urban Nature Pact journey. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, good morning. If I can just check if am I audible?
Yes, I can hear you well.
Right.
Thanks.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you very much, Chairperson Ingrid. But also, I think to equally for the invitation. I think also just for the recognition of the work that is currently happening in Durban, in the eThekwini municipality. But I think also just special tribute to some of our predecessors who have actually laid, I think, the foundation for this kind of work that we are doing in the city of Durban. And then now the baton has actually been handed down to some of us to essentially continue with that with that work. So I think just really, I think from the city of Durban's perspective, maybe wondering why in fact we've committed. I think one of the things is that we are at a sense of a global biodiversity hotspot where we are located. We also do have a legacy of open space planning since the late 1980s that has actually has been happening in the city of Durban, which really I think looks at mainstreaming biodiversity into municipal planning, but as well as decision making. I think one of the things that we've realized over the years is that I think a biodiversity loss is continuing, and I think that point has already been made. I think through Ingrid's input, but also I think from Sandra, in that we are aware that at least for 7 of our vegetation types in the city of Durban, where we can no longer meet our conservation targets, but also we understand that currently I think part of biodiversity that is protected and managed, it's only just over 7%. Which is under formal protection as well as management in the city of Durban. I think the other thing I'd like to mention is that in 2022, we're also signatories to the Montreal Pledge, of which also I think Sandra reminded me of that. We're unfortunately not able to make that COP, but we were present at COP16 in Cali. And also just having looked at kind of like the smart goals in that when we actually signed up is that when we did the analysis of the Berlin Urban Nature Pact is that at least we can see that in 11 out of the 15 commitments that are required, at least 11 of them already are underway, Ingrid, and that we're not starting from ground zero. Basically, and how the pact aligns, I think, with some of the city's goals is that we do have a Durban metropolitan open space system, which is approximately 95,000 hectares in size, which is about a third of the entire municipal area across a range of property ownership, as well as some of the associated mainstreaming tools, such as biodiversity stewardship and how we work with rural communities to ensure biodiversity protection. This is also part of our integrated development plan in terms of our plan 1, which is looking at sustaining the natural environment as well as some of the other national biodiversity reporting requirements of which we do have. Also, this work, it does align with the biodiversity strategy as well as the action plan. But I think also just some of the emerging, I think, future plans in the short, I think, to medium term, things around like resource use policy and how we undertake advocacy and communication on biodiversity as well as building conservation partnerships. This is also not a replication, and I think that's a point that Sandra had made, in that we see, I think, quite a lot of similarities and alignment, especially with ICLEI's CitiesWithNature reporting, of which we already are signatory. So there isn't anything new really in terms of what it is that we are doing. Just a few more points to make here, Ingrid, in terms of how we see the pact actually supporting the biodiversity agenda in the city of Durban. I do think that, yeah, there is for us, I think there's a need to continue with the legacy, but also I think having an ambition for biodiversity protection, management, as well as restoration in the city of Durban, just so that the benefits, so that it does, so the biodiversity, that at the end of the day, it benefits the people as well as the municipality in terms of its development trajectory. But I think lastly is that they also want to demonstrate what is possible at city level. I think really taking action for biodiversity. And I think the key thing really for us is also to ensure that there is a level of resource mobilization where we are then able to increase our level of biodiversity protection and management towards the 30% targets. I think Sandra did make the point that it's quite an ambitious goal in terms of where we are sitting currently. We are at 7%, but we are wanting to really, I think, accelerate the activities that we are doing in the city of Durban. Thank you for that, for the invitation. That is the Durban's story and inputs and relationship with the Berlin Urban Nature Pact.
Thank you so much, Sabelo. And it's really, I think it's really important, some of the points that you made around highlighting not just what you've done. And I must say to people out there that don't know the city of eThekwini or Durban, I think Sabelo's been quite humble, actually. They're a real front runner, particularly some of the public open space and stewardship work that they've been doing over the years. But I think you're being very frank and honest, also showing that gap between the 30% target and 7% where you currently are. And then I think another very important point that you mentioned when you talked about how the pact has benefited the city, which I'm really glad you did touch on, is the sort of 2 points around benefit to the people, a very important factor within developing economies, and something that drives our biodiversity work and policies in this country. But on the other hand, also the point about resource mobilization and how there's a real hope and an ambition that signing up to something like the Berlin Urban Nature Pact can help the city leverage that additional funding to close that biodiversity funding gap. And I think, Sandra, maybe this is a topic for future engagements with cities, which we are planning. It's a really, really important one. So thank you very much. Before we open the floor, well, actually, before I give Jade the opportunity to tell us about future events, I just want to, I know that Sandra mentioned that you have a short video. Is that ready? Can we share that with everybody? So let me just touch in there with Jade.
Yes, I have the video. Let me just see what is the best way to share it, because I need the sound to play. Let me just give me a second.
So while Jade is sorting the tech out, and I'm glad it's not me, let me just find out whether, Sandra, maybe if you have any reflections on the eThekwini journey that you want to make at this point.
No, actually, yeah, many thanks, Sabelo, for this really pretty look into and how does it work at Durban. And I see a lot of similarities also with Berlin and what you're doing and which journeyings are you going through. And I also have to say, Durban was one of the first cities that signed the pact, so we're still in the process. So we're really happy to have you also as the first city from Africa to be on board. It also shows, of course, the commitment. And I think this is also what I think we haven't said it. It's we cannot emphasize this enough, but I think we always say like the pact is like 50% it's about the ambition to be pioneers, but the other 50% it's really about the capacity building and learning from each other. And this is where like also Ingrid and Jade making like running this webinar. So because no matter, and I know some cities sometimes in Europe don't believe they can learn from other cities outside of Europe, but they can, because there's so many similar challenges that we are facing, and so many solutions that have been developed in other cities, like really like far away from us, but that could maybe also work in our city. So this is where I think this is like a big added value, and also at the heart of the pact. So this joint learning, I think this is always where the inspiration comes from. Okay, and now I hand over to Jade.
Yes.
Around the world.
Okay. Can everyone hear the sound?
Yeah.
Environmental impact increases, but cities also hold incredible power to counteract these effects. And their role in protecting and restoring biodiversity, and in turn ensuring people's health and well-being, has never been more important. This is where the Berlin Urban Nature Pact comes in, a global initiative by cities for cities that helps urban leaders take bold action for biodiversity by offering cities an actionable framework to address critical environmental challenges and pave the way for a more sustainable and greener future. Rooted in international agreements, the Berlin Urban Nature Pact goes beyond pledges. It provides a tangible, action-oriented framework for cities and regions. The pact enables cities to set and achieve ambitious biodiversity goals, and thus enhance local efforts to address climate change, protect ecosystems, and ensure the health and livability of urban areas. At the core of this initiative are 28 specific targets covering key issues. These targets translate into real-world actions, practical measures that are attuned to the needs of nature and people alike. Each signatory city needs to pick and implement at least 15 targets. The Berlin Urban Nature Pact links cities and regions across the globe that are committed to safeguarding biodiversity. Through collaboration and knowledge sharing, cities find inspiration to tackle common challenges. This peer exchange strengthens the global effort, allowing urban leaders to collectively work towards sustainable solutions. By joining the Berlin Urban Nature Pact, your city takes its place among a community of forward-leading changemakers, collectively seeking to improve urban spaces for all. Together, we can create cities that not only coexist with nature, but thrive with it. Is your city ready to step up for nature? Find us online and join this growing movement of urban leaders striving to create a better world with nature.
Thank you very much. I must apologize. We had a few technical glitches. I think that has to do with bandwidth. But yeah, maybe Sandra, is there a link? Is that on the website that we can just share so that
I
people
will share the link in the chat with everybody.
All right. Okay, and then I just want to emphasize the invitation right at the end. I know that there are many amongst the audience here this morning who are from cities that are considering or maybe haven't heard about it. So please, this is an open invitation to also sign up to the pact. And if you need any information on this, we will share our email details between Jade and Sandra and myself, so you can email us. But I'm seeing a flurry of questions now in the Q&A, which I'm very excited about. And the first one is quite a simple question. Where can I find information on how the pact relates to the on-the-ground activities in Berlin? I think, Sandra, that is one for you.
Sorry, which question was it? The first one or?
First one,
Yeah,
where
on the ground activities. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a very good question. So we just started. It still hasn't been published. Of course, we also have a representation of the pact at our, I would say, from the Environmental Senate Department website. It still has to be published. That's a very good question because the thing is, as I said, we have not, we will of course also report through the Cities with Nature platform where we at least can see how Berlin is doing. But on the website, but I apologize, it's all in German. There is no English translation. You find also more about all the activities we're doing. But at the moment, it's not really linked to the Berlin Urban Nature Pact because we, as I said, we have a biodiversity strategy. We have a Queen Carter for urban nature. But we will, like, once our website on the pact has been published, which is in English, we will also try, it's a good suggestion to link it to our projects and activities. So at the moment you can find a lot, but it's in German.
And on that, don't worry, Cities with Nature has, what is that, a translation bot? That's one of the good things about AI. The language might be a little bit funny, but I think overall we'd be very happy with the interpretation.
Cool.
So yeah, so there is, for example, we have some from Mexico City, we have things in Spanish. So it's these days with AI, it's not a deterrent anymore. The next question is, how is the Berlin Pact affected by local government changes? And how is it funded? And this, in a sense, touches on a point that Sabelo made, where he referred to the fact that they do within their biodiversity functions in the city and their integrated development plan and their budget system, they obviously do have some of these activities that are funded, but there is that shortfall that he was talking to. So maybe Sandra, if you could talk a little bit about the effect from local government changes and how in your city Berlin Pact is funded. And Sabelo, if you want to add something, maybe after Sandra as well.
Of course. So I know we know about governance changes, but we also know it differs quite heavily if a governance changes after new elections. At least I can say in Germany, it doesn't mean that all the stuff will be replaced. We faced that and we experienced that, for example, in Colombia, where almost all people got exchanged, even from the tech stuff, which makes it really difficult. So this indeed could be like have an impact if you have a new government and with the whole, and that maybe decides to go another direction. But I think what we think in most cases, like this is why we say it's very important to get the commitment from the highest political level possible. As it means the mayor, if possible, should sign the pact so that it can always refer. The mayor did sign it, so it can refer to it. And what is also helpful in this regard, despite maybe the changes in the government, you still probably have also the linkages to the global commitments, right? So those won't change. And I think we have to see like how to find like the bonds that are more stable, because if you live in a city where really everybody gets replaced and also like the knowledge goes, that might be really difficult. But I also saw there's a lot of knowledge transfer, at least from the people who remain to the new stuff. As I said, in Europe, it's a bit different maybe than in other countries, but I think we have to see like what ties we can use to have like a certain stability. And this is why it's good that we are really linked to the global level and not just to the national level. And then, yeah, funding. Oh, it's like our favorite topic. I have to say there's a lot of budget cuts in Berlin as well for the upcoming times. It's a hard battle. So the pact per se, we don't have funding at the moment as the pact. There is not so much funding available. And we in Berlin, for example, we do work within the budget lines that we have, where we can already like that's available to implement biodiversity measures and other measures that are necessary for education within the existing budget lines. However, we also need to look for other private and innovative financing, and this is also where the pact says, hey, let's also look at this together, and maybe we also have, of course, possibilities to jointly find like new resources, maybe also like global sponsors that can support the pact. This is something, and Ingrid, you already said it, it's a super important topic. what we really have to look up. But this is also like really written in the pact that we have to look for complementing and supporting finances, and because public funding will not be sufficient.
Thank you,
Sure.
Sandra.
Yeah.
Sabelo.
Yeah, Ingrid, if I can add, like I think we've dealt with maybe, let's say, like two changes. I think one of them was around changes in municipal boundary, which sometimes that happens in the South African context, where again we've had to kind of like do biodiversity assessments to include the new areas, and how we've then have had to kind of like remap and recreate the open space plan. But I think other changes, yeah, especially around political leadership. I do agree with Sandra that it's important that you get the highest decision-making body in the organization to kind of like endorse some of these plans. I think by us having the open space plan as part of the integrated development plan, it's almost anyone who comes into office, essentially they have to kind of like continue what has already been adopted. I think what is also important is when new leadership does come into place, is also to look for opportunities for capacity building. It's almost you have to do that every cycle, just because there is like a changeover, like of officials. Most times you are lucky if majority of your political oversight committee remains the same, but it's using, I think, those changes that kind of for opportunities around capacity building. I think the two other things is that we also do what is known as the annual state of biodiversity reporting. We are on to our 17th one. One of the things that we have then done, Ingrid, is that we have then translated it into isiZulu, which is a local language in Durban. Like we've done it now for the second time, and we are planning to continue doing that. It's really, I think it's a way of making sure that majority of our citizens actually do have information in a way that actually they would they would understand. Maybe just the last point around funding. Yeah, there are also challenges where, like, with reduction in funding. I think Sandra's mentioned that in the city of Berlin. I think also after COVID, we've had floods in Durban, at least on two occasions. We've had riots, of which we had to then like rebuild the city as well as the infrastructure. In that, yeah, there has been sometimes I think funding cuts, like, for some of these type of works. I think then the point is quite important that we've also realized that you've also got to look for new funding sources and look at ways and opportunities in terms of how one can then have essentially closed that financial resource gap that does exist from time to time. Thanks, Ingrid.
Thanks, Sabelo. And while I have you on the word, I'm going to keep you there. Our next question is about, does the pact include public engagement aspects? This particular delegate has said they know from Paris that this has been very helpful for being able to enact ambitious plans. And I recall that you mentioned the sort of stewardship and the community engagement work that you do in your city. So if you can just maybe elaborate on that a bit.
Yeah, so I think every like, especially with the integrated development plan, it does go out together with our budget every year. I know that sometimes there's quite a lot of information that people have to kind of like consider as part of that public participation process. So firstly, yes, it is there, but that level of public participation might not be effective, since there's quite a lot which actually goes into the IDP update process. One of the things that we do with our Durban Metropolitan Open Space System is that once every 5 years, we do have to keep the plan essentially updated based on recent developments, whether we found new important sites or sites that have been restored, or maybe sites that may have sites that might have had, for example, like informal settlements, or they have received development applications. So we are currently now in a cycle where we're updating our metropolitan open space system. That, Ingrid, will then go through quite a massive public participation process, advertising via the newspapers, but also advising the the affected landowners where there might be changes, and that would also then go along with that kind of public meetings in the different regions throughout the city. I think the one thing maybe just around biodiversity stewardship implementation, because that is actually working with landowners. There are sometimes difficulties in the rural context in that you have the tribal authority, you've got the Ngonyama Trust Board under the custodian of the Zulu King, but also you have kind of like other community users, and whether it's cattle grazers or medicinal um, healers. It's almost you have to engage all of those different layers within those communities to really understand some of the key, important, so some of the important biodiversity considerations in those respective areas. I think if one doesn't do that, it's almost you might actually miss out on some opportunities, but also in terms of understanding the challenges that may exist in terms of rolling out your biodiversity stewardship plans.
Thank you. We've got a few more questions. I'm going to ask the next question of Sandra. What processes are there towards evaluating progress towards the SMART targets envisaged by the Pact? And then we have one last question for Sabelo.
I think Jade already introduced that and said that we have a reporting. We say like once a year, we will look to what extent we have achieved our targets. This will happen through the Cities with Nature platform. And I talked also about flexibility and knowing that municipalities already face a lot of burden. So we work together here with IUCN and really try to find a way that's feasible, like to achieve. So we wouldn't ask for to crash a lot of databases, but to build on data that the cities already have. So that could really like address and respond to the targets. But we will also come with guidance and support and to see like what other data and indicators are out there to measure the targets. So that at the end we can at least see where are we, and we try to have a really simple scheme where we said, okay, nothing happened yet. Next step is like the planning process, and the third step we say, oh, we already like started like initiating and developing the measures. Fourth step could be implementing the measures, and the fifth step like we have achieved the measures. But it's very important to be honest, and because it's not an easy task to do, but yeah, it's foreseen like once a year, but we will support the cities with this task.
Thank you, Sandra. And the last question is the kinds of barriers. What kinds of barriers do you find trying to enact the pact? And I'm going to ask Sabelo to say a few words about this. Sandra, just to mention that there is a question about using the information for study purposes. If you could just also just maybe type an answer in the Q&A. Thanks, Sabelo.
Yeah, thanks, Ingrid. Yeah, I think local government does deal with a lot of things. And I think for us, I think one of the barriers that I foresee is also just I suppose around information, which is why then I think we've decided 2 years ago in terms of translating our annual state of biodiversity reports, because we would like that the majority of our citizens actually would like for them to understand, like, that there is a biodiversity crisis in terms of also what we are doing. I think for me, I think information is one of those barriers, and how we actually take that information forward so that we can then build, I think, community champions that can then work alongside ourselves. I think also it's about also building capacity. You find that we have, for example, what we call conservancies in the South African context, which are community volunteers that really work together with us on managing biodiversity within their communities. Traditionally, those have actually been in our urban sort of areas, not necessarily like in the rural communities. And so it's also, I think, some of the barriers, it's about capacity, capacitating those conservancies. Also just happy to report that in some of our like communities that on the outskirts of the city is that we have managed to register like another four conservancies in areas that they never existed before, and they do need I think a lot of guidance and assistance in terms of helping them to really I think just roll out I think the kind of work that they do. So I think for me I'd like perhaps to highlight those at the moment. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Sabelo. We have one last question. Will the data collected from the reports be made available to the public? The short answer to that is yes, through the Cities with Nature platform. But we have unfortunately run out of time. And I must say it's been really amazing, not just the inputs that we've had from Sandra, Sabelo, and Jade, but also the very lively Q&A that we've had. So I'm going to hand to my colleague Jade. She has a few important things and information just to share with us. Please, Jade, over to you.
Thank you, Ingrid. So lastly, following what happened at the CBD COP16 in Cali in October last year, the Berlin Urban Nature Pact has really gained international traction, with several cities having already signed or expressed interest to sign. And in line with this and the Pact's commitment to fostering collaboration, peer-to-peer exchange, cities are invited to convene in person this year in October. The event will be happening from the 8th to the 10th of October in the city of Berlin. And we hope to bring together political and technical city representatives to accelerate urban biodiversity action and strengthen the global community of practice. If your city is interested in participating, learning more about the event, or even signing the Berlin Urban Nature Pact, please do not hesitate to contact us. Our email address you'll see on the screen, and I will also paste it in the chat. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jade. And just to repeat again, I really hope that for those cities at our webinar who have not yet signed up or are thinking about it, please use this opportunity to really contact us. The idea is we really want to have more cities so that we have a lot of global traction. It makes a lot of difference in these global agendas when you can see there's a critical mass of cities that are signing up and supporting a pact like this. I'm going to ask just a quick impromptu, literally 1 minute, please, a last reflection, a last message, both from Sabelo and from Sandra. So let me hand over to Sabelo first and then Sandra, and then I will close the webinar. Sabelo.
Yeah, thanks, Ingrid. I think for citizens, there are quite a lot of challenges, but I think one of the things that I think we have the ambition to make sure that we continue with the kind of legacy that we have inherited, and then really I think for us to try and lift up, I think our activities, as you've seen there, that we are wanting to move from the just over 7% protected and managed areas, like and get as far as you can towards the 30%. And I think that's gonna need I think in fact the global biodiversity framework speaks about this whole of society approach, building conservation partnerships, resourcing and supporting I think some of the organizations that are out there. So it is a commitment that we have that we will continue to strive towards.
Thanks, Sabelo, and for reminding us about the whole of society approach. I think that's very important. And if anybody out there is looking for an amazing place to have a vacation, I know it's that time of the year in Europe, please head to Durban, eThekwini. And with those notes, Sandra, your last reflections, please.
Yeah, maybe you said it always so wonderful, Sabelo, so it's hard to add anything to that. But just to say, as I think cities can be one of the biggest lobbyists, like at global level, to do something about the decline of biodiversity. It has never been, I think, an easy task to do over all the years, but it's more important than ever. So I really encourage everybody, like who's here from a city or has a contact to a city and think, oh, my city could be a good candidate to join this global commitment, because as Ingrid said, as we want to show with a critical mass, it has to be, we don't aim for 1,000 or 100. I think we want to have cities who really mean it also and are ambitious and want to be pioneers. And that it's not just about signing papers. It's really to come jointly to action. So if you're interested, and this is why we also said like for the meeting in October, mainly for the pact cities, but we also give the opportunity to sign the pact, right, with next to our mayor in October. So he will be there as well, and spread the word, because like we have a lot of power to do something. So let's use the powers. Thank you.
Thanks. And I think that's a very fitting way to end. That's the point about from ambition to action. And I think that through the examples of both Berlin and eThekwini, we've seen that this really does work. It does have an impact and it does make a difference, particularly in this time when we're facing the triple crises around biodiversity, climate, and pollution. And organizations and parties globally are saying that we need to address these in tandem and in an integrated way, and from a whole of society and a whole of government position. And obviously the important point about the more critical mass we have here, the stronger the case for closing that biodiversity funding gap and for mobilizing resources that are so much needed at the ground level. Thank you very much to everybody, all of the participants. Your attendance here and your engagement and interaction has been really very interested. Our email details are in the chat box, so please, if there's any more information, feel free to contact myself or Jade or Sandra. And lastly, just to Sabelo and to Sandra and Jade, our speakers today, thank you so much. And with this, I close our webinar. Bye-bye.